Yes, people, yes, people, yes, people. Welcome back to another episode of the We Talk Football podcast. This week, I was lucky to be joined by a special guest, on Zoom, of course. I sat down and spoke with football journalist Joe Krishnan. This week, we talk all things top six. We talk the huge Liverpool and Arsenal fixture coming up on Monday. And we talk football transfers on the We Talk Football podcast. Right, so Joe, should we start off by talking about the big fixture coming up this weekend, or actually on Monday, the Liverpool Arsenal fixture?
Yeah, so obviously this is a big one for Liverpool because while they already had the game against Chelsea, I think this is their really big test of the first season, their season, as title winners. Trying to defend the title is a difficult thing to do. And only Manchester City, Man United, Chelsea have done it. So it's a chance for them to put down a real statement about what they want to do under Jurgen Klopp. They've already done that by winning the Champions League and the Premier League as well. So it's against a very let's say thriving Arsenal side under Mikel Arteta. It's a really difficult one for them, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one. Obviously, the game against Chelsea was, from the outset, perceived as being the first big challenge, but I think Chelsea aren't really ready yet with the combination of their injuries and stuff. And Arsenal looked good at the beginning of the season, especially after getting one over in Liverpool in the Community Shield. So it should be a good game, really. Arsenal, I think they beat West Ham 2-1, a game that they probably would have lost last season, kind of like gritted it out. And Nketiah's looking good, Lacazette's looking good, Aubameyang's looking good. So it's looking good for Arsenal at the moment. It's interesting to see how Liverpool actually deal with their threat.
Yeah, I think one of the big differences between their performance against Fulham and the one against West Ham, where they won 2-1. I mean, I do think they were really lucky to get the points. But as you touched on, this is like the new Arsenal. This is nothing like what we saw under Arsene Wenger or Unai Emery or even Freddie Ljungberg for that small stint. So, this is what we've got to get used to now. This is Arsenal. They battled for points. They play good football out from the back. That's what I've always enjoyed about Arsenal, watching Arsenal, is that top quality kind of level of football. Quick passing, quick moving, attacking football. I didn't see much of that against West Ham, but I think Kieran Tierney, because he wasn't there, like what he offers at the left centre back in the three man defence. He offers balls over the top, runs forward into the midfield. Him missing, that was a big part of that. And I think when he's back in the side, him and Bukayo Saka down the left hand side would be a really good combination.
It'll be interesting to see how Liverpool kind of play it against Arsenal, just because this season, probably since the middle of last season, we're playing a ridiculously high line. And like you say, the players you mentioned with Tierney, with Saka, with Aubameyang, with the pace that Arsenal have got, it will be a risk to play that kind of high line against an Arsenal team that, like you say, are thriving at the moment. So it'd be interesting to see how Jurgen Klopp plays it if he doesn't have his team sit like a yard deeper. Just because I feel like Arsenal could be like a massive threat.
Yeah, I do think that Liverpool operate best when they're squeezing teams. So they press up with that high line that like they did against Chelsea, and the midfielders really like press forward, press intensely. The other team playing out from the back, and we know Arsenal like to do that. They like to do that a lot. That's really the only way they play under Arteta, and it worked a lot against Fulham. Maybe not so much against West Ham. I don't think they really had the personnel, Kolasinac. I don't think he is quite on the same level as Tierney with the ball at his feet. He's a strong guy, but he's not, he's not anywhere at that level, I don't think. So I think with Liverpool, I think they will try and squeeze Arsenal just like they did with Chelsea. Because I think that's the way, that's their formula, the winning formula. They know that's going to work against most teams. It might leave them a little bit exposed over the top, but they're so good with that high line, they're likely to catch Lacazette, Aubameyang, Pepe or Willian offside anyway. So I think that's the way they're going to go about it, and I think they're going to be the team trying to dominate the play, and Arsenal maybe have to play on the counter. But
well, it's definitely a game that you see like Liverpool enforcing their will. It's at Anfield this Monday, so I definitely think it's a game that Liverpool obviously should go into it being favourites, but I don't know. Arsenal have been they've been surprisingly good at the beginning of the season. Well, surprising for me. I think other people kind of foresaw it, but Arteta seems to have got them in shape. And Liverpool, the first game against Leeds, obviously, you can give them the excuse for it being the first game of the season, kind of a lack of preseason for all teams. And it was a wild game. Leeds came to play and Liverpool came to play, and I always felt that Liverpool were going to outscore Leeds. But the game against Chelsea, they weren't really tested that much. Chelsea did sit very, very deep, didn't really press, and kind of allow Liverpool to play. And then obviously when Chelsea go down to 10 men, the game's going to be slowly squeezed. The life's going to be squeezed out of Chelsea in the second half of the game. So it'll be interesting to see Liverpool tested against an Arsenal team that are really pumping and really up for it. And I reckon it's definitely going to be the game of the weekend.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think Arteta deserves a lot of praise for what he's done so far with the squad. He's got rid of the bad eggs. So Mesut Ozil, Matteo Guendouzi, they're nowhere to be seen at the moment, no matter how much they want to get in the team. He's made it clear, if we're not all going in the same direction, you're not in my team. And personally, I think they're better off without both of those players. I mean, Ozil's had some incredible seasons at the Emirates. There's no denying that once upon a time he was one of the best playmakers in Europe. I don't think he's as effective now, age 31. As for Guendouzi, he just seems to have a problem with, I think he's gone from such a small-time player in terms of at Lorient and Ligue 2, and now he's come to Arsenal. Everyone's raving about him, rightly so, because he put in some great performances last season, playing for the France national team. I think it's gone to his head a little bit. And I do think that Arteta's given him a reality check in leaving him out of the squad and given the chance to Ceballos and Xhaka, who's come back into the fold brilliantly. And those are the two he seems to be quite happy with in that centre midfield. So there's no really real reason to bring the other two back when he's got a working system. And I think he really knows what his best 11 is, and that's a massive asset to have in the Premier League. I think a lot of managers chop and change, and you don't have that continuity. So against Liverpool, everyone needs to know their jobs, and I think with Arsenal that's certainly the case. So they'll give them a good go, I think, this weekend. Definitely.
Most definitely. And off the back of the Guendouzi point that you touched on, it seems like the turning point for that was the Brighton game last season where he had the run-in with Mopé.
Yeah.
And he's not really recovered from that. And I do respect it from Arteta in terms of getting the bad eggs out of the team. I don't know how you're going to shift Mesut Ozil with the money he's on. But like you say, it might be a case of he's past his best, where the game might have passed him by. You don't really see that many traditional number 10s anymore. It was a crazy stat to see on the weekend where James Rodriguez obviously had an amazing game and made 0 sprints.
Yeah.
And I don't think many managers are going to tolerate that, especially in a team that's not built around Mesut Ozil. So I feel like you say, his time's done at Arsenal. It'd be interesting to see how they actually move on from him in terms of shifting him off the books.
Yeah, I think his next play would be to go somewhere where he's going to be the big fish, where he's going to be the star attraction. Maybe someone like Fenerbahce, which has been mentioned before. Someone else has mentioned that he could go to MLS, where, obviously he could get a big salary, could play his fortnight like he allegedly likes, so it really depends on where he wants to go next. But I think now he's got a family, maybe going somewhere like this a bit more where he can settle and sort of, send the kids to school and whatnot, or where he's comfortable with his family. So obviously he's from Turkish descent, so maybe Fenerbahce might be a better option.
Well, it's definitely time for him to make a move and kind of refresh and kickstart his career again, because the time is running out in terms of Mesut Ozil's career, and he is a fantastic player and been a fantastic servant for Arsenal. I mean, brilliant to watch in the Premier League, but it seems like this Arsenal team's moved on.
I agree, totally agree. I think it's time for him to say goodbye, and if he wants to save the last years of his career, maybe he should think about a move in January, possibly.
Yesterday we saw Liverpool's probably biggest title rival in action in Man City, dispatched the Wolves 3-1. I think the scoreline makes it sound like it was an easier game than it actually was. Wolves did play very well, missed a lot of chances. Mm-hmm. Kevin De Bruyne obviously back doing what he does best in terms of creating and scoring goals. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that title race goes, because for the last couple of seasons it's just been Liverpool and City. Well, last season it was just Liverpool. So it'll be interesting to see if City can actually sustain form and not have those dips that they had last season.
Yeah, I think one signing that's really going to help, plug that gap is Nathan Ake. For one, he's obviously a left-sided centre half. They've already got one of those in Aymeric Laporte, but he's had his injury problems, and a lot of the time it was like Otamendi and Fernandinho playing as a centre-back partnership. And I'm sorry, but you can't tell me that that's going to be a title-winning defence, especially when you've got Walker and maybe Zinchenko or Mendy. It's a very unbalanced defence. I think Pep's gone about solving that this summer with obviously the sign of Ake. He sort of brought João Cancelo back into the fold, where he didn't play yesterday. But I do think that defence, like we all know that City have got an incredible attack. They can score at any point from any place on the pitch when you've got De Bruyne, Sterling, Mahrez, Jesus, Aguero. So there's no doubt that as an attacking force, they are going to be up there. But defending wise, they lost 9 games last season. Like, you can't be losing that many if you're Manchester City. And I do think that Ake will bring some strength to that back line and, really give them, how shall I say, some solidity at the back, I would say.
Well, for sure. And again, Ake was not a player that went under the radar, but obviously he was playing in the struggling Bournemouth team last season. And I'm surprised they kind of picked him up without any kind of competition from teams such as Chelsea, who were looking for a centre-back. I know Arsenal went and got Gabriel, so they sorted their issues there. But it's quite interesting to see that City managed to pick him up, a player that should have been on a lot of teams' radars, but they picked him up pretty stress-free.
Yeah, I think maybe the fee in this climate, 40 million, obviously, it does seem like a good deal because he can be at City for the next 5 or 6 years. He's obviously got a lot of Premier League experience. He's a Dutch international, so I think for Chelsea, if they were going to take up the option to re-sign him, it would literally be just to sell him on again. I think that sort of chapter's closed for him. But yeah, as you said, Arsenal picked up Gabriel for half the price. Is he half the player of Nathan Ake? I'm not entirely sure myself, but I think Ake...
He really looked good against Fulham.
He basically plays the way Pep wants. He's very good with the ball at his feet. He's a strong player in the air. So, but yeah, going forward with City, Kevin De Bruyne, I mean, what a player. Goal and assist yesterday.
A lot of people's pick for player of the season again this year. He's I think clearly the best player in the Premier League. He's got it all. He's a full package. I think in terms of world football, he's clearly top 5. And yeah, I think where City might struggle is obviously Jesus. He's got an amazing goals to game ratio in terms of his time at City, but I don't know if he's the absolute answer from moving on from the Aguero era. I do think he is a very, very talented player, but again, Aguero sustained injuries in the last 4, 5, 6 seasons, ever since he's been in England. I don't know if Jesus will be the answer for the duration of a very strenuous Premier League season.
Yeah, I mean, Aguero is such a tough act to follow because the guy has scored 20, 25 goals a season for the last 7 or 8 years. It's just incredible. Even in spite of the injuries he's had while at City, it's just been... He's such a joy to watch, and the amount of times he scored against Chelsea, and I've just had to stand back and applaud it because some of the goals he scored are unbelievable. That's a really tough job for Gabriel Jesus, and obviously he needs to be a little bit more clinical. I think it will sometimes take him 4 or 5 chances before he gets that goal. Whereas Aguero, you give him a chance in front of goal, 9 times out of 10 he puts it in the back of the net. So it's I do think he has the potential. He's still young. I think he's 23 or 24 years old. So, he's still got a lot of improving to do. But I wouldn't be surprised if City went and signed someone like Lautaro Martinez this summer because he seemed like
he'd be absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I think he's just like a continuation away from Aguero. Do you know what? So
yeah, for sure.
But yeah,
for sure. Well, so that obviously I don't know, that the City performance yesterday, it was impressive more for the fact that they haven't really had a pre-season. They went pretty deep in the Champions League, and to churn out a 3-1 victory away at Wolves, who were going to be there or thereabouts in terms of challenging for European places, was definitely an impressive showing for the first game of the season, especially after watching everybody else play their fixtures.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was good to see City run out yesterday.
Yeah.
What was very, very exciting last week was Spurs. They got busy in the transfer market.
Sergio Reguilon and Gareth Bale. Those are two signings that can take you from, the top 6 to the top 4 in an instant. I'm not going to pretend that I've watched Reguilon every week, but certainly when I covered the latter stage of the Europa League and, some of La Liga games last season, he was, the energy that guy has is incredible. He races up that left-hand side. He'll ping in crosses. He'll make the tackles, even though he's quite, a small guy. He's got a slight frame, but he's not afraid to get stuck in. And I think that's exactly what Mourinho wants. It's exactly what Tottenham wants, because as much as I like Ben Davies as a player, I don't think he's your number 1 left back that plays every week. I think he's
not dynamic enough.
No, I think you need someone that has that gritty desire to win. And I think Reguilon, as proven by his performance, in the Europa League final, that really, showed what a good player Tottenham are getting. And as for Gareth Bale,
goes without saying, really, doesn't it? Gareth Bale.
It's an incredible capture for Daniel Levy, and obviously for Mourinho. I think, from my understanding, it was that Levy was pushing the deal. Because I think Spurs needed that star quality alongside, Harry Kane and Heung-min Son up front. So, and they need goals. Obviously not after the 5-1 against Southampton, but I think that was a bit of a freak game in that Southampton just completely collapsed. But a lot of the time you see Tottenham struggling to get through team.
Yeah.
So,
that's the thing. Like, I think that 5-2 against Southampton was like an aberration.
Yeah.
I don't think that. Apparently, Jose said after the game that Kjøberg gave him a bit of insight in terms of how Southampton were playing. I think they played with a ridiculously high line, and someone was just in behind every time Harry Kane picking them out. But I do think that these signings are definitely going to take Spurs to a different level, and they're definitely a team that have taken themselves from a top 6 contender to not a guarantee of a top 4 team. But if these signings pan out, then I don't see any reason why Spurs shouldn't be challenged for 3rd or 4th this season.
Yeah, and especially obviously Mourinho, there are question marks about whether he's suited to the modern game, because it's much more tactical now. And obviously he's a very, motivational manager. He likes to get the squad fired up in his own ways. Obviously some of them questionable. Some of them have worked in the past. So, I think for Mourinho to have like a better squad all round, and ones that he knows are winners. So Bale was everyone knows that Bale was a winner, 4 Champions Leagues. He's been at Tottenham before. He understands what the club is about. I think having those kind of players will definitely help Mourinho in trying to get the message across that, we can't just be all friends here. We need to start winning trophies. And
for sure.
And I think Tottenham can win a trophy this season. Maybe the FA Cup.
I've pegged them to win a trophy this season. I feel like, my pre-season predictions are kind of like out the window. Spurs finishing either 5th or 6th, but obviously with these signings, it kind of changes everything.
Yeah.
But I do think that they will win a trophy, especially with the signing of Gareth Bale. Like, if you just look at his impact at Real Madrid, obviously Ronaldo was hugely successful before Bale got there, but it took Bale getting to Madrid for them to actually get over the hurdle and win La Decima. And all he's done at Real Madrid is win trophies. So I definitely think he'll bring that to the Spurs team. And I feel like Spurs are kind of like the Premier League zeitgeist in terms of all eyes are on them, not just because of these signings, but also because of the Amazon doc, the Jose Mourinho show. And it's kind of giving you a little bit more of an insight into the players, into the workings of the club, into Daniel Levy, who's before this was a very, very closed off individual. And it's done its job in terms of bringing the attention to Spurs, but with that attention comes pressure. So I do feel like it's not do or die this season for Spurs, but I do feel like a trophy is definitely expected.
Yeah, I think that the fans expect something, with this new stadium, with the signings they're making statements off the pitch. Now it's time for them to truly deliver first trophy since 2008. And as I said, I think they've got a really good chance of doing it because Mourinho is so focused on winning. He will have that in his mind this season. Like last season wasn't his first full season in charge. This is his team now. He has to prove that he can win things. And with the Amazon documentary, it's just great, isn't it? to see
It's
some
amazing viewing.
Yeah, it's amazing viewing. I mean, honestly, some of the, working in the world of sports journalism, you do get some insights of, dressing room rows and team talks and whatnot. Things like that do leak out. But there were some things in that documentary that have never been shown before, and that's what the kind of content you want to see. I'm not going to obviously spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched it yet, but it's a must watch. Honestly, it's so good.
It's so engaging, and also at the time they release it at the beginning of the season, it's interesting how they tie in with like real life storylines. So obviously it's reality TV at its essence, but having an insight into how Jose Mourinho, what he thinks of Dele Alli, and then seeing Dele Alli being left out of squads in the present day. Again, it just ties everything together. I just think it's incredible viewing.
Definitely.
It's just interesting to see how a club works and how a manager thinks.
Yeah, and with Dele Alli, of course, him being left out of the squad for the last game, that was, it just shows, as you said, that maybe Mourinho doesn't fancy him as the kind of player now he's got Bale. Does he really see any room for Ali? Obviously when he first came in, Ali was scoring, he scored 4 or 5 goals in the first 5 games. I'm not really sure where it's dropped off, but, I think Ali does have a little bit of a problem in terms of training. And, Mourinho demands so much. And if a player isn't delivering that much, then, he's going to be gone. Juan Mata, for example, when he was at Chelsea, he just didn't fancy him. And off he went. Iker Casillas at Real Madrid, if he decides...
Even like when he first came to Chelsea, he had an issue with Eden Hazard, and obviously a player as talented as Eden Hazard, Mourinho couldn't afford to fall out of him. But again, like you say, training seems to be very, very high on Mourinho's priorities in terms of how he assesses players.
Yeah, definitely. I do see a bit more of a ruthlessness from especially from Harry Kane and Son now. Like, I think they're very much focused on winning, and beforehand it was all a bit pally, I think, at Tottenham. And I think that's what Mourinho sort of changed now. Like, if they were losing, they didn't really know how to get themselves out of the rut that they have with Pochettino. So I think under Mourinho, they're building towards something for me. And I do think they will challenge Man United for the top 4, for sure.
Yeah. Well, definitely. And like you say, I feel like that kind of honeymoon period is over for Spurs in terms of the way that people view Harry Kane and the way that people view Son. Like, Harry Kane, I believe, is going to go on to be one of England's greatest ever strikers in terms of his goal scoring record at national level and at domestic level as well. I don't think he's going to be somebody who beats Alan Shearer's record, but I do think he's going to get there or thereabouts and maybe overtake Wayne Rooney in second place. But ultimately, he's going to be judged on trophies won. So I do feel like you say, the honeymoon period's over, and it's time for them to get down to business and actually deliver some silverware for Spurs. Yeah,
I think it would be really key in terms of like how they want to keep the squad, going forward in the years to come. Obviously Harry Kane, I think he's 27 this year, so he's getting to that point in his career where if he hasn't won anything, and teams are interested, Real Madrid, Manchester United, and they're winning trophies, there's only one thing that's going to happen. He's going to go and, seek those trophies elsewhere. He's already touched upon it before. There's been interest from clubs, and I can't blame him for that either. And I don't think a lot of Tottenham fans would blame him if he did leave, So
definitely not. Like, I feel like these signings will definitely kind of not reinforce Tottenham's like motive in terms of trying to win trophies, but definitely prove something to Harry Kane in terms of this is a club that is looking to win silverware, that's looking to bring in players that will help you as a player. So I definitely think these signings will be a catalyst for something at Spurs this season, and for Spurs fans, just hope that it's positive. On the other side of that spectrum, a club that's not really making the signings that the fans are expecting, Manchester United. What's your thoughts on them this season? Obviously, there's not even murmurings. It's just discontent within the fan base in terms of their lack of activity. At this point, the only first team player they brought in is Donny van der Beek, who again is an amazing player, but is not the signing that they're expecting. Obviously, the shadow of Jadon Sancho looms large. He's a player that they expected to sign pretty early on in this window, and as of yet, nothing's happened yet. So, what's your view on Manchester United's inactivity in this summer transfer window?
I think with Manchester United, it's a really complex situation for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Mainly because he's outlined time and time again who he wants to bring into his squad. Obviously not to the media, but certainly to the people above him. And it's clear that Jadon Sancho is one of those people. And the main guy who he sees, in terms of taking his team forward. And I do think that they should spend the money on Jadon Sancho, no matter how much it costs. It's going to be, let's say, in the £100 million ballpark anyway. That's how much it's going to cost. I think if Man United are dallying over a few million at this point, what is the point? Because it's only going to cost them when it comes to the end of the season. And let's say Tottenham finish above them and they're in the Europa League, it's going to cost them a lot more than a couple of million for the next couple of seasons. So
it happened in January though, like with Bruno Fernandes, they dilly-dallied, they're trying to get the price down. I think he wasn't in the squad for the game against Burnley. They lost that game. And say at the end of the season, obviously they came third and they made the top four, but say they didn't, these points are valuable even at the beginning of the season. The 3-1 loss to Palace obviously just accentuated everything and created a bit of a furor within the fans. But again, these problems you could see at a mile off.
Yeah.
And they're at risk of perception becoming reality in terms of like the perception of the fans right now is that the fact that the board take way too long to get these deals done. It's a painstaking process. I think the reality of the situation is that Manchester United are trying to operate as a big club in this market and trying not to get the trousers pulled down by the clubs they're negotiating with.
Yeah.
But come 5th of October, if these signings haven't been made, that perception then becomes a reality. And then where do they stand? If the results aren't going Ollie's way and the club haven't made the signings that the fans have expected, Ollie's going to be the one that faces the brunt of that in terms of losing his job. And United are going to be stuck in limbo as they've been for the last, say, 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right there. And I do think that you have to, for all the talk that Manchester United are a massive club, they're one of the biggest in the world. That's you can't argue with that because of the history of the club, the Champions Leagues, the Premier League under Ferguson, that has to be taken into consideration. But at the same time, they haven't won a title since Ferguson's retirement. And that's a long time now, 7 years. They've won a couple of FA Cups and League Cups and Europa Leagues, but would you honestly expect as a Manchester United fan not to have won the league or the Champions League in the last 7 years based on what you had won beforehand? It's all seems to be trying to take the shortcut towards success. It's all the spending that they've had. I mean, I think Maguire was a good signing. They needed Maguire, but again, they took far too long over it. And I think history is repeating itself with Sancho now, and it's only going to harm Solskjaer when it comes to the point that they have more results like they did against Crystal Palace. Like if they lost 3-1 at home. That's a game they should not be losing, but they lost that game last season as well. And I think if he doesn't, deliver the results without the signings that he had, he obviously, he's going to be under a lot of pressure. And I think if you brought in Mauricio Pochettino, he would come in and probably get the signings he wants, for one.
Yeah.
And he would probably deliver those results and get them into the top four. So I kind of want to know, what are they waiting for? Maybe because of the situation with the coronavirus at the moment. But I think if they are really that big a club, then they should be able to withstand it, I think. But yeah.
For sure. Well, they're a club that it's always said that Manchester United are a massive club, they're a huge club. So if I was a Manchester United fan right now, I wouldn't want to hear from the board or from the hierarchy that we're trying to get the best deal possible. Like top clubs, not only do they operate like big clubs and make sure they get themselves the best deal, top clubs also have to pay a premium on occasion. Like if you look at the Eden Hazard example for last summer, where Real Madrid identified him as their key transfer target, and he made it clear that Real Madrid was the only club that he wanted to go to. They still had to pay a premium. Eden Hazard, who was 27, 28 at the time, with a year left on his contract, Real Madrid are going to pay north of £120 million in terms of the final fee and the add-ons to Chelsea. And that's for a player who had a year left on his contract, who's nearing the end of his prime. For Jadon Sancho, who, apart from maybe Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappe, is the most coveted young player in the world, you break the bank to get him. You can't, as Manchester United, you can't be linked with a player that strongly, and the player's kind of indicated through different outlets that he wants to come to the club. You can't not secure that signing.
Yeah.
just not only for the on-field benefit that Jadon Sancho bring Manchester United, but also for the saving face aspect of it. Like they've got to get that business done. Now, I think I'm in the small minority of people that think they will still get that business done because they have to. But again, time is ticking. We've got 2 weeks left, and if they don't get it done, then they're in big trouble.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, they have already got a really talented attacking force in Martial, Rashford, Greenwood, but Sancho is a generational talent, and just because you've got a good attack already, it doesn't mean you should try and further strengthen that. And I do think that Greenwood's only 18. He still needs time to develop as a player. He's not a finished article. I think that Jadon Sancho is reaching that kind of peak level at the moment, as you said. Mbappe and Haaland aside, there aren't many better players in terms of delivering goals and assists. In the Bundesliga, he looks so confident whenever he has the ball at his feet. It doesn't look like he's ever fazed by the occasion. And I do think that that's the kind of player that Man United have been missing over the years. They've tried to find the Ronaldo successor. Memphis Depay has come in. Obviously, Nani, not too long after him. Would Sancho be that man? I think he could be. I really do.
For sure. He's definitely the man to fill that number 7 shirt for Manchester United. Like you say, players have come in and they failed. Obviously, Depay has gone on to have success elsewhere. It just wasn't the right time for him. They brought in Di Maria, they brought in Alexis Sanchez. They've had people try and fill that shirt that haven't been the right profile. They've either been at the wrong side of their prime or just not the right fit for Manchester United or not ready. It seems like Jadon Sancho is that perfect fit. Even seeing him on the weekend against Mönchengladbach, with the way that Oli wants to play counter-attacking football, especially against the bigger teams in the league, he's perfect at that. The goal he set up for Erling Haaland was just a testament to that, and I feel like he'd fit in like a glove at Manchester United. So I don't really understand why they're not pulling the trigger of that.
Well, I think the one reason I think is that Solskjaer, I don't think they're utterly convinced by him, by the job that he's done. Obviously, they finished third last season, but I think a lot of teams stuttered towards the finish line, and I think United sort of took advantage of that in the end. But I think under Solskjaer, there doesn't seem to be much of an identity going forward under him. Under Arteta, you've got a really solid coaching blueprint. Under Lampard, you've got this kind of motivational ability in the way how he speaks to the new signings and the players. They all seem to be on his side. Under Guardiola is his, speaks for himself. Klopp is the best coach in the world at the moment, you probably say. So, yeah. But Solskjaer, I'm afraid that I don't think I see much of him as an elite manager. Could he go somewhere and be a success? I don't think so. I think this is all about the Man United thing, and he's sort of riding off the back of his success as an interim coach, still in this role. Yeah. And I think if they really want to start, getting their success back, they need to hire a world-class manager. And for me, those two candidates would be, Pochettino or Max Allegri. And I think, I don't know if you agree with that, but I think Solskjaer will eventually get found out. It might just be too late in the season, for them to replace him, though.
I totally agree with that. What would you say to those Manchester United fans that say, fair enough, like, it's all well and good linking United with Poch, but what has Poch won? How long will the Poch project take for us to start winning trophies? Because they're already halfway through the Solskjaer project in terms of the money they've invested in the players, whether it be AWB last summer and Harry Maguire, or Van der Beek this season, and maybe potentially Jadon Sancho. If you then go and change the manager again, how long is the Poch project going to take to really get going? And have United got that time to waste?
Yeah. I mean, they're going to have to believe in him, and his track record with youngsters shows that it's worth believing in, because Harry Winks has come to the fore under him. Dele Alli really. I think it was like 2015, 2016 when he really broke out as a young star. He credits Pochettino for a lot of that. Harry Kane as well. He gave him the chance, and he's thrived in the first team. So if United do have those youngsters in their academy, he's certainly the man you want. It might take a bit longer to get that sort of project going, but I think we all know that Poch is a quality enough coach that he could get them into the top 4 with that squad. I think there are doubts whether Solskjaer can do it again, especially because all the teams have strengthened in one way or another. And as for Allegri, I mean, again, his track record speaks for itself at Juventus. And I think, he got into the Champions League final in 2015 with that Juventus squad as well. And, unfortunately, he was up against an amazing Barcelona side. So I think for Allegri, it would be a case of instant success, but he might want to tear up the team, whereas I think Poch would actually be quite happy to work with the players he's got there. So if you're going to go in that direction, you have to decide what's more important, short-term success or long-term success with, bringing the youth through. And I think for Man United, that's really important, about the DNA and whatnot. So
for sure. Well, obviously Patrice Evra went on his rant this week about the problems of Manchester United, and I think it's well documented. And again, we're only one game into the season. I feel like the loss to Palace didn't help their case, but again, the pressures on the boards, the fans are at the necks of not only the Glazers but also Ed Woodward. It seems like this week they've tried to spin it in terms of linking themselves with every player in the market to try and seem like they're active. But I'm just interested to see how Manchester United do this season, because without any more summer acquisitions, I think they're going to struggle to finish in the top four. I do feel that Ollie's going to pay the price for that.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think with Van der Beek, obviously he came off the bench and he scored against Palace, but up until that point, there didn't seem to be anything that United were really doing. Like Rashford, I don't know what's happened to him on the pitch. I really don't know. His level has dropped so much. Obviously, Martial was on that incredible run of goal scoring, but even he looked a bit leggy. I mean, maybe it's just a case of, the season didn't finish that long ago and they're struggling. They haven't had a proper rest. That's fair enough. I think everyone would understand that, but they can't afford to be in that kind of slump for too long. As you said, Liverpool started well, Manchester United, City started well, Chelsea started relatively well, and they will get better as well. So there's not just 3 rivals this year for the top 4. There's about 5 or 6, maybe even 7 if you include Wolves as well. So it's going to be tough.
You briefly touched on Chelsea there, and that's why I want to kind of round up. We're both admittedly Chelsea fans. Both highly critical Chelsea fans. I think I'm a little bit more optimistic than yourself in regards to how this season's going to go. But I'd just love to get your thoughts on Chelsea, obviously off the back of that difficult game against Liverpool where things didn't necessarily go our way. It was an interesting first half. Obviously, Chelsea sitting deep for a lot of it. But we managed to contain Liverpool quite well up until Christensen made that silly error and brought down Mane, originally given the yellow card, and referee went to have a look at it and gave a red, rightly so. And then from then on, kind of knew it was going to be a slow, painful death for Chelsea. Second half, we contained Liverpool as much as the team could, but it was only going to be a matter of time before one of their front three got on the score sheet. Mane with a lovely header. And then I can't even begin to explain that error from Kepa. It just seems to go from bad to worse for that guy. I actually now feel sorry for him to the point where I think it's negligence for Lampard to actually be playing the player. They dropped in the FA Cup final, and then Jorginho missing the penalty kind of topped it all off. But I'd love to get your thoughts on not only that game, but how Chelsea have operated in the transfer market and how we're going to do for the rest of the season.
Well, let's start with the game because I do have some strong thoughts on that. And I do think that because Kepa made a mistake, I think it has rather overshadowed what Christensen did. And I think it was just a matter of a rush of blood to the head, a slight lapse in concentration, which has really cost Chelsea, like the whole game, I think. 0-0 going to half-time, the way we had played, the way we contained Liverpool, they had a lot of possession, but it seemed the setup that we had was doing the job in terms of they weren't allowed to go through the middle areas. They were having to go wide and try and find areas there. And I think they decided, right, we'll switch it up. We'll go long with a ball through the middle. And Mane, he's so quick. Very few defenders can catch him. I'd say probably Kyle Walker. Anyone else, you're not going to catch him if he's already on the run. And unfortunately, the gap between the defenders was big enough so that he could run through and stay on side as well. So Christensen, he's been caught out, he's been caught sleeping, and for whatever reason he's decided to bring him down. I do think that Kepa may, when he's coming out of his goal, I think he might have been able to get there. Whether he would have done a good enough clearance, I don't know. But I think when he made that decision, he ended Chelsea's chances of winning, I think, or even getting a point. And even if Mane did round the goalkeeper and scored 1-0, that's easily assailable. But I think the red card, as you said, it did feel like a slow, painful death for Chelsea in that second half. We all knew what was coming. We knew they would put together one move where it was slick football, and it really was a good goal from Mane. You know, on the right-hand side, the 1-2, the neat little cross into the box from, I think it's Firmino, and then obviously the header from Mane. You know, you can't blame Reece James for not tracking him there, I don't think. So yeah, it was unfortunate, but I think obviously we have to talk about Kepa. You know, it is. I do feel sorry for him a lot because it's not his fault that he was bought for that money, and that's a lot of pressure on him. And I do think he has been let down on a number of occasions by his defenders. You know, I will pick out Christensen because sometimes he's been guilty of just watching a cross go over his head and just sort of standing there. And I think, like, you have to follow up. You have to try and support your keeper. On the other hand, you know, that error that he's made against Liverpool, you can't defend it. Lampard didn't defend it. Yeah, it's just, I just think his confidence is so low at the moment, and there's every reason for that. I think someone like Petr Cech really needs to have a sit down with him and just say to him, look, when you make a mistake, just erase it from your mind, because he seems to have that on his mind the whole time. Every time he makes a mistake. So it is unfortunate.
I think it's easier said than done with that. Obviously, I saw images last week of Petr Cech maybe on the training ground, got his gloves back on, got his helmet back on, and I think he was doing a little bit of work with the keepers. But with Kepa, again, at points last season, I think the hate that he was getting from Chelsea fans online was just unacceptable, really. I don't think you benefit from doing those things to a player that is your player. But I do think that some of the blame lays at the door of Frank Lampard. You can't, from my point of view, you can't drop a player for your biggest games of last season, that being the FA Cup final, and then bring that player back in to start the beginning of this season. His head's clearly all over the place. He's clearly hearing an outside noise in terms of him not being good enough. He knows in himself that he's not been good enough. I don't think Lampard's put him in the best position. I feel like if you know that this Mendy's going to be coming in, which has kind of been confirmed with Lampard pre-Barnsley press conference, I feel like you start the season Caballero and you wait till you bring in your man, as opposed to putting in the player that everybody knows is kind of done at the club. I do agree. I think that was maybe he's just decided to give him a chance, one last chance to prove we're bringing in Mendy, but not necessarily as your replacement, but just as competition. But I think the first two games have proven that he needs the time out of the team to regather his composure. Maybe he needs to get a loan somewhere and regain his confidence or something. But certainly if Mendy comes into the side, I think he'll be Lampard's number one. Maybe if it's not an instant, move, maybe it will be Caballero in goal for the foreseeable future until Mendy sort of gets settled in. But I think, Kepa needs some kind of boosting confidence. He needs to improve, needs to prove the mistakes are gone. The only way you're going to do that as a goalkeeper is in training and in matches. But unfortunately, if you make one mistake in a match, that could be it. That could be the whole game. And it's such a tough business being a goalkeeper. I wouldn't want to be a keeper ever because of that. You can make 10 good saves, one bad mistake, and you're only going to get remembered for that. But I think with Mendy, it is an important signing for Chelsea because it does give them that solidity and the variety in terms of which kind of goalkeeper they want in goal. Caballero at 38, he is getting on. I don't think he could be your goalkeeper if you really want a title challenge. So I think the club have done the right thing there. I think. But it's just interesting to. It'll be interesting to see how we play it. Whether we use the international break in a couple of weeks as a marker to then blood Mendy and post that, or if he comes in straight away and is in for the game against West Brom this weekend. But let's move on to more positive news about Chelsea. Obviously, seems like Thiago Silva is now fit. So Ben Chilwell is nearing fitness. And Hakim Ziyech and Christian Pulisic are on their way as well. So obviously Chelsea have made mad acquisitions this summer with Ziyech, with Werner, with Silva, with Chilwell, with Mendy, hopefully with Havertz. So what's your thoughts on the business Chelsea have done this summer?
It's the most exciting transfer window for Chelsea since 2003. I think, when Abramovich first came in. I remember back then I was obviously quite young, and not so young now. But I do remember, like the names that came along, Crespo, Damien Duff, Makaleli, those are huge names. And they were more experienced types, I think. But with the team that Lampard's putting together, this team really could be, title challengers, Champions League challengers for the next 5 years if they stick together. Timo Werner's only 24, Kai Havertz is 21. So, and they're already really quality players. They can only probably get a little bit better, but it's frightening to think that they can still get better because they are that good. As we saw from the first 2 games for Werner, the guy is electric. His pace is incredible. And not just that, his eye for goal as well. He makes good runs in behind the defence. And I think Chelsea have been missing a striker like that for a long time. I don't think Morata was ever really that kind of player. No,
he wasn't.
It's a lot of money to spend, but when you actually think about it, in terms of him being Chelsea striker for at least the next 5 years, it's gonna pay off, I think, in terms of his goal, and it won't be long, I don't think, from what I've seen from the first 2 games, that he will get that goal fairly soon. But as for Havertz, I think he will need a bit of time to adapt to the game because he is like a playmaker type. He also does, chip in with some goals as well. He can play in a false 9. I think we need to find what his best position is in this setup. And once we have that, I think we've got a really good player on our hands, I think. So I'm really excited.
What do you think his best position is personally?
Havertz. I think it would be as a number 10. If it were me, for the front 4, if it were me, I would have Christian Pulisic on the left, Havertz behind the striker, Ziyech on the right, and Werner up front. And obviously, I know that's quite like a attacking 4-2-3-1. You could use that against lower half teams, I think, and obviously switch to maybe a more balanced 4-3-3 for the bigger games against top 6 rivals or whatnot. Yeah. But I do think that, all of a sudden, Chelsea's attack has gone from Willian, Pedro, Hudson-Odoi, Giroud to Werner, Havertz, Ziyech, Pulisic. That's incredible.
It's crazy transition. And I do think it's going to take a while for those players to kind of settle in. But again, this has been a summer that's been very, very necessary, especially with the ban previously, and then losing Eden Hazard, not really bringing in someone to replace him. I feel like we're also recovering from the summer of 2017, I think it was, when we brought in Bakayoko, Drinkwater, Morata, signings that just never panned out, and kind of our squad suffered as a result of it, and I don't think we've ever really recovered up until now. So I do feel like we're making up for that summer. But when you talked about Werner there in terms of him being electric, I also agree. I think he's going to kill it this season. I think he's going to score a lot of goals, but in terms of Chelsea strikers, they seem to fall into one of 2 categories. You either have that Hasselbank or that Drogba or that Costa, that burly striker that's got an imposing kind of presence on the pitch, and that they're going to put themselves about, if it's not just scoring goals, as being a nuisance for opposition defences. And then you have the vein of Chelsea defenders such as the Shevchenkos and the Torreses and the Moratas, those strikers that haven't really worked out, whether it be because of tactical reasons, manager reasons, reasons off the pitch. It's just it's kind of interesting to see where Timo Werner will fall into that. I do feel like he'll fall into the first group of strikers, and I do feel like he'll impose himself. He's got a bit about him, but there seems to be a curse for Chelsea number 9s.
Yeah, and you can't ignore that because, I'm sure Werner's very aware of it because he says he's watched Chelsea growing up. And I do think that, as I said, we've not really had a striker like him before, who's, he's quick, he's mobile. Obviously, Drogba was more of like he was such a presence up front, a target man, like no one would get the ball off him in the air. Whereas like Morata, he was good in the air, but very weak when it came to like holding up the ball. And unfortunately, Torres, how can I say this? We didn't get the best version of Torres, unfortunately, because of his injuries and whatnot. I still don't think it was as bad as people make out. The guy won the Champions League, for example, and the Europa League. So, yeah. But at the same time, I think Werner will live up to the hype simply because he's a proven goal scorer in a good league. And I think the way we play will be quite similar to how RB Leipzig sort of play from last season. So I don't think it's going to be that much of a change for him going forward. So, and he's got a manager that really believes in him as well. He's got Havertz there to supply him with the goals, and Ziyech as well. I'm really looking forward to him. So,
I can't wait for Ziyech.
Once it all comes together for Chelsea, it might be maybe October or November where we really see them hit good form. But I do think this is the season where, you know, it's been 3 years or so since we won the title. This is like another cycle of players, another manager at the helm. This could be the year that we challenge as well.
Oh, for sure. And what do you think where do you think that sits when it comes to pressure for Frank Lampard? Because obviously last season, I think he exceeded expectations. I don't think anybody really had Chelsea finishing in the top 4 after losing Eden Hazard and not being able to bring in any players. Obviously, Kovacic was done on a permanent. We agreed Pulisic earlier in the year. But if Lampard fails to meet expectations, or wait, what would expectations for you be for Frank Lampard?
I think minimum now he has to finish third or above. I don't think just saying top 4 is enough, because if you're going to finish behind Liverpool and Man City, then that's probably fair enough, because they are ahead of Chelsea in terms of their, you know, trajectory to success. I think they've got the managers they've had there for 4 or 5 years, and they've got the squad. Whereas Chelsea are just sort of still kind of putting it together. There's still things to be worked out, you know. So I could forgive them 2 teams finishing above Chelsea, but I think now they have the best squad of the rest of the league, and I think they have to be targeting third at least, and some silverware. Now, obviously, we came 4th and got to the FA Cup final last year, and I think that was a really good achievement, as you said, for Frank Lampard, because losing Eden Hazard, people were expecting Chelsea not even to get anywhere near the top 4, because he was so central to the team. And, you know, he deserves massive credit for getting Mason Mount, Tammy Abraham, Tomori for the first half of the season, playing like, you know, like they played for Chelsea for several years. You know, it was their first season. I don't think that was quite appreciated. And obviously there was going to be some burnout, as we saw in the second half of the season. It's only natural that happened. But as you said, with no new players, you're working with this young squad. I do think Lampard deserves a lot of praise. Obviously, there are things that went wrong with the defence. You know, conceding 54 goals, you can't do that. And I think at least he has identified that and made alterations to his squad to address that, you know, with Chilwell and Thiago Silva. So he realised he needed those players. He got the players, and I think now we'll start to see what Lampard's really made of. You know, as a coach, can he really live up to his expectations? I personally think they'll finish second this season. And I want them to win the title, and I think they will challenge for it, but I think they'll just fall short. But I think 2021, 22, that's the season. I think that's the one where you've got to look out for Chelsea, big time.
Well, I've kind of made a bold claim this season and said that Chelsea are going to win the league, and then after seeing that Liverpool game, I want to kind of retract that. But I'm going to stick with my prediction of Chelsea win the league, just because I feel like in the summer where you spend over 200 million on new signings, and they are in positions where you've needed to address your issues, I feel like it's no fun if you don't predict your team's going to win the league. So I still feel like we've got a chance, and I feel like there's been a lot of overreaction to all teams' fixtures and results over the first match week, or the first couple of match weeks. But I feel like when things get settled down, I feel really post this first international break, when teams get their players together and they really understand their identity, I feel like we'll see Chelsea come good and the true form come through as well. So, I'm fairly confident, as you have to be. I think I'm maybe a bit more blindly optimistic than confident, but yeah, we'll see how the season pans out for Chelsea.
How did your fantasy team do in the first week?
I don't really want to talk about that, man. I don't want to talk about that. I'm not doing very well. So I'm in a few leagues. I'm in the We Talk Football League. I think I'm in 19th or 20th place in that one, and a few leagues with my mates. And I've just had an absolute mare, man. Especially put out a bold statement saying I don't believe in Calvert-Lewin, and he's going to bag in 4 goals in 2 games. So I feel like feel like I'm having a bit of a mare, so I need to change up my team. I might even play my wild card for this week and just change it all up because I've got no City or United players in there. But yeah, not going too well for me. How about yourself?
The first week was pretty good. I think I got like 65 points. And you know, I thought, oh well, I need to bring in the City players and take out the Liverpool players because Chelsea are obviously going to win in game week 2, and that didn't quite work, did it? So I did have Calvert-Lewin. So you know, I am a believer in DCL. I think he's a hard worker, and alongside Richarlison, you know, who I think he's going to get at least 10 goals this season. So, but yeah, I had a really bad week. I think I got about 43 points in the end, and I lost out on one of my head-to-heads by 1 point as well. It was an absolute killer. So,
mate, the worst thing about this week in terms of fantasy is that all my mates who are Spurs fans had an incredible week. I've had Harry Kane as captain. They've got Son in their team. They've absolutely killed it, and it's infuriating to me. I've muted all the group chats.
I don't blame you at all for that. I don't, honestly.
Yeah, man. But yeah, fantasy's not gone well. But again, we go again this week. Chelsea have got West Brom, so I feel like I'm going to stick Timo Werner as captain. I think he's going to bag a couple and get me going in fantasy.
Yeah, hat-trick is on the way, I think, for Timo.
It is. It's incoming. But yeah, Joe, man, I appreciate the time. Obviously, getting started with this thing is fledgling. And yeah, we reached out to you. You said you could do it, and I really appreciate you jumping on this, man. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's all right, man. No problem at all. And I'm sure we'll catch up soon. And that was episode 3 of the We Talk Football podcast. Make sure you go and follow Joe on Twitter. His handle is @Joe Krishnan. You'll find that in the description. And please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. You can find us on all major platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Instagram We Talk Football Podcast, and on Twitter WTF Podcast 90. Make sure you keep your eyes peeled and your ears pinned for episode 4, and enjoy the football happening this weekend. Take care, guys.